Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Ben Frost, and I'm the Professional Development Officer for the APA's Northern New England chapter, and I'm also one of the coordinators of the Planning Webcast Series Consortium. The consortium is a group of chapters and divisions of APA that are not formally affiliated with APA, but we're kind of a loosely knit ragtag group that somehow manages to put on really awesome webcasts almost every Friday throughout the year. Today is Friday, August 28th, 2015, and we will hear the presentation Ethics Skit by the Delaware Planning Thespians. For technical help during today's webcast, please type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, and I will try to help you. But for truly technical problems, please call the 1-800 number shown here, 1-800-263-6317 for GoToWebinar staff tech support. For content-related questions during this presentation and for comments on the presentation and your own thoughts, please type those into the questions box located in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. We will answer those as time allows at the end of the presentation during Q&A. On your screen now is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions for this year's series of webcasts. I want to take a moment to thank all of the participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible. And today's webcast is sponsored by the Delaware Chapter of the APA. To learn more about all chapters, visit www.planning.org/chapters. And to learn more about divisions, visit, predictably, www.planning.org/divisions. On the screen now is a list of a few of our upcoming webcasts. To register for these webcasts, please visit our new website, which is at www.ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And that is at the bottom of your screen. In fact, our slate for the entirety of 2015 is now full, and we're starting to book webcasts into 2016. That's almost unbelievable, but there you have it. To log credits for today's webcast, the event number is E.31391. So you'll go to your APA dashboard under your own account, select activities by provider, look up the Delaware chapter, find the title, ethics, skits, and so on, or you can just search by the event number 31391. This webcast today is approved for 1.5 CM ethics credits for live viewing. You can like us on Facebook. Our name is Planning Webcast Series, and that's perhaps the best way to receive up-to-date information on the webcast series sponsored by you, chapters and divisions. We also have a YouTube channel, and that's where we put all the recordings of these webcasts at youtube.com/planningwebcast. PDFs of presentations are also available on the Ohio Planning Chapter website under Planning Webcast page. We're recording today's webcast, and it will be available on the YouTube channel, so you can just go there and search for it. And now, I would like to introduce Peter von Glahn, who will present to you today's Dramatis Personae. Peter, you have the stage.
Good afternoon. Good morning to those west of here. Welcome to this episode of the Certification Maintenance Webinars for the Continuing Education of Certified Planners. Today we will address the ethical responsibilities of being a certified planner. This webinar has the following format. We will present 2 radio plays addressing various aspects of the code. Each play will be followed by a live panel discussion of the play and of any comments or questions from the audience. We suggest that you have a copy of the Code of Ethics handy for reference as you consider the issues addressed in the skits. The code is available on the APA website at planning.org/ethics. Please participate in the discussion, asking questions or sharing your thoughts on the violations of the Code of Conduct that we illustrate. This session may be counted for 1 1/2 CM ethics credits. Please remember to visit planning.org to update your credits after today's presentation. These radio plays have been pre-recorded. If you have questions or observations, type them into the chat box and we'll attempt to cover them when we go live. Springfield City, located in northern Delaware, is a small city suffering from the economic downturn. A large company, Amazoogle, has decided to expand their existing site in the city's downtown historic district. They have the funding and are ready to go. All they need is the city government's approval. Ron, the city's economic development director, is 110% behind the project, so the Amazoogle executives foresee no problems getting their way. So let's listen in as the city's government realizes that Amazoogle is coming. Springfield City, Delaware, has been struggling with the loss of businesses and outsourcing of jobs for years. Neighborhoods within the city have been abandoned. City officials are having difficulty enticing businesses and people to come and stay in the city rather than other parts of the county and state. Amazoogle is one of the few businesses left in the city, and it employs 200 people. They are looking to build an addition to their existing site. The mayor, economic development director, and an executive from Amazoogle are all attending the season opener of the Marsh Rats, the local minor league baseball team. They get together to discuss the new building addition. Let's listen in.
Mr. Mayor, Ron, it's a pleasure to see you both at the game.
Nice to see you, Bob.
Great to see you, Bob, and those are great tickets. I was telling the mayor that you have a potential project for our city.
Yes, we do. We're looking to add a new 150,000 square foot distribution center. We have been looking to add it at our Ware site in the downtown. However, we will need to move quickly on this project as there are funding issues at play. We have federal funding coming, and the bank will get antsy if we're not under construction soon.
The relationship with Amazoogle is very important to the city since you're such a valuable employer. How many jobs would be created by this venture?
A total of 150 new jobs will be created.
Don't forget all those construction jobs. That's at least 100 construction jobs, and then there's all the spin-off jobs and all the businesses that will be created after that center opens.
How can I help you help the city?
We know the size of the new building meets requirements of having to go through the state's planning review process and may have environmental issues with those darn protected striped muskrats, and it's in a historic district. However, it would be a shame if we would lose our financing or have to find a location outside of Springfield.
Don't worry about the state process. The city's planning director is good friends with the state planning director. And don't worry about the historic district. They're a bunch of busybodies that will do whatever we need them to do. I'll talk to them.
Ron, talk to the planning director and get things going. Don't worry about those stupid striped muskrats.
Great. We don't want to lose those federal funds, and we don't want to have to move to Dell with the lithium issues. Enjoy the rest of the game.
This could be great for the city, and it would keep our good relationship in good standing.
Tom, the long-suffering AICP City Planning Director, is a city native. He is no stranger to controversy, but he is counting down the days till retirement. 204, but who's counting? Ron is newish to the city. He comes from the big city and is used to getting things done, and done his way. Is this one too much for him to handle? His day is just beginning. Let's take a look as Ron meets with him.
Tom, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. How are you, Ron?
I'm great.
What can I help you with today?
Well, I ran into the mayor and also Bob from Amazoogle at a ball game over the weekend, and we found out that Amazoogle is looking at building a 150,000 square foot addition at their Ware site.
That's good news. They will need to meet with myself or one of the planners to discuss the project to ensure the zoning ordinance is complied with.
Don't worry, I talked to them, and I assured them that there would be no problem with the ordinance.
The size of the project requires state review through their planning review process per our MOU. The Ware site is also in the Historic District and will need to be reviewed by the Historic District Commission prior to the Planning Commission review.
Look, I don't care anything about that MOU. This project needs to be fast-tracked so we can gain those jobs. The site needs to be under construction in 6 months or they're going to lose their federal aid package.
I know that jobs are important. However, we have a process, and I believe there are endangered striped muskrats in the area.
Hey, there is a historic district meeting next week, and I told them we can get it on the agenda. And look, there's already a study for the muskrats, so we don't need to worry about them. Keep in mind that those things were on the menu at the Springfield Diner up until last year.
We do have a historic district meeting next week. However, I'm concerned about time to review the project and completing public notice, and there's still the state process.
Look, you're friends with the state planner. You can make it work. Talk to him. We don't want to lose this opportunity. And doesn't your wife work in the construction field? And doesn't she need a job? The mayor wants to get this done. It's evaluation time. We both can use some points in our evaluation. Look, you have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Tom is still thinking about his conversation with Ron and what impact this project could have on his retirement when he calls the state planning director. Charles was born and raised in Springfield City and has been the state planning director for 15 years. He became good friends with Tom when he taught the city planning course at the local university.
Hi, Charles.
Hi, Tom. How are you today?
Good, thanks. Only 204 days until retirement, but who's counting? How are you? How's the family?
We're all fine, thanks. The kids are enjoying their summer vacation. We will see you at the beach this summer?
We will be down at the beach this summer. I do hope we see each other. Thanks. There is a new project proposed for the Ware site downtown. It is a 150,000 square foot building addition. It just barely meets the requirements of our MOU to be reviewed by the state's planning review process. Is there any way to get a waiver for the project? You've done it before with smaller projects.
The old Ware site. Isn't that the Amazugal site? My stepson, Graham, works there as the CFO. He worked his way up the ranks. It was the only job he could get after he graduated with a degree in Sanskrit. Isn't that in the historic district, and doesn't the state highway serving it have traffic issues?
That's the site. I'm going to have a new planner look into it, and we can get it on the next Historic District Commission meeting. I'm not worried about the traffic. The State Transportation Department did a study a couple of years ago that should still be good. And in the downtown, I don't think we would support any road widening.
Okay. Send over any information you have regarding the project. I'll have one of my planners take a look at the project.
Thanks. I appreciate any assistance you can provide. See you and your family at the beach.
The state and city planners both have their AICP. The city planner, Kathy, is a newer planner with only a couple years' experience and passed the exam in May. The state planner, Mary, is a veteran planner who has worked in both the public sector and private sector for 12 years. The planners are sitting at their desks when their directors walk in and give them the plans to review and report back to them.
Kathy, here's the big redevelopment plan for the Ware site. Review it and start working on the Historic District report. I'm placing it on next week's Historic District Commission meeting and then the Planning Commission meeting for the week after that. It's important that this plan is fast-tracked as there is funding issues.
Thanks, Tom. Does it meet the public notice requirements for the Historic District meeting?
I looked into it and it will work. I need you to review the plan and make sure this happens.
Have they submitted to the state regarding the state planning review process?
I called Charles at the state and asked him to review the plan to see if it would qualify for a waiver. Don't worry about that, and just review the plan for the upcoming Historic District Commission and Planning Commission meetings. Have a good night. And remember, we have a meeting tomorrow to discuss your evaluations.
I will get right on it. Bye.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Charles.
Mary, here's the information the city provided regarding the redevelopment of the old Ware site. The addition is slightly over the MOU requirements to take it through the planning review process. Take a look. Get back to me. They're looking for a waiver and need it expedited.
Oh, okay, Charles. I'll get right on it.
I wish you could help out my BFF. That's what kids say, don't they? BFF? Don't get kids these days. I wonder if Tom's wife can build that shed I've been wanting in the backyard for my muskrat traps. Those darn rodents.
Bye, Charles.
Kathy, the city planner, and Mary, the state planner, are reviewing the project plans in their offices. Let's listen to their thoughts.
This plan is a mess. Historic District Commission next week, and the week after that, the Planning Commission. Nothing from the state about their review. Ugh, and don't forget about those endangered striped muskrats.
The plan doesn't seem consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. It's close to the size area for the MOU, but shouldn't it go through the state plan and review process if it's that close?
The building height is too tall. The Planning Commission could grant a waiver. There are no architectural drawings, so I have no idea if it will fit in with the existing buildings, let alone meet the criteria for the historic district. They also need a waiver for the number of parking spaces and about another 6 items. Not good. Okay, let's keep reviewing.
I wonder if anybody in the transportation department has seen the plan. There's also the issue with traffic. They did a study a few years ago and said there needed to be a major upgrades to the intersections. And what about those striped muskrats?
The historic district report is almost done. Not much in it. What am I going to do? It should be consistent with the existing buildings, which isn't bad. It fits the character of the area enough and is better than the rundown buildings. It does make sense to allow for the building addition. It would help the local economy, but what about the process?
I'm not sure it should get the waiver. It is a large addition and could impact the area it surrounds. Then what would the benefit be to going through the planning review process if these items could be addressed as part of the city's review process?
Tom did mention our meeting tomorrow about my evaluation. What was he getting to? That was scheduled 2 weeks ago. What to do?
Charles seemed to want it done to help Tom out. What to do?
Hi, folks. My name is Jim Galvin, the AICP. I'm the Professional Development Officer for the Delaware Chapter. Our desire today is to engage you, our participants across the nation, to offer your comments and observations. Please participate in the discussion, asking questions, sharing your thoughts on the efforts presented this afternoon. So we have with us today 3 distinguished chapter members to discuss the ethical implications of the Amazoogle story in Springfield City. First, we've asked Anne Marie Townsend, Director of Planning and Community Development for the real City of Dover, Delaware. Anne Marie manages the Planning and Inspections Department and the Parks and Recreation Department. Prior to this position, Anne Marie worked for the Office of State Planning Coordination as the Principal Planner, and the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control was the planner. Anne Marie is a member of the American Planning Association, the American Institute of Certified Planners, the current president of the Delaware Chapter of the APA, and the Delaware Recreation and Park Society. She has a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science degree from Towson University and a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Delaware. In her professional capacity, Anne Marie has made incorporating health into community design and recreation programs a priority. Anne Marie is an active volunteer with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. She lives with her husband and 2 sons in downtown Delaware. Downtown Dover. We have David Edgell, AICP Principal Planner with the State of Delaware Office of State Planning Coordination. As the Circuit Rider Planner for Kent County, His primary responsibilities include coordinating and aligning state land use priorities and resources with county, municipal, and development interests. In addition, David works on statewide land use planning, school siting, capital and facilities planning, demographics, and integrating land use planning into the state budget process. Prior to coming to the Office of State Planning Coordination, David worked with the University of Delaware's Institute for Public Administration, assisting small towns with planning, zoning, and governance issues. He began his career working for the City of Dover Department of Planning and Inspections, where he helped draft Dover's comprehensive plan and manage the city's development review process. He has a Bachelor's of Arts in Environmental Studies from Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, and a Master's of Regional Planning from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. He's a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, as past president of the Delaware Chapter of the American Planning Association, the vice chairman of the Dover-Kent County Metropolitan Planning Organization Technical Advisory Committee, and a member of the Dover Silver Lake Commission. And we have Jeff Rigner, a vice president of Whitman Ruckert Associates and manager of the firm's Wilmington, Delaware office. His passion is transforming our communities by making smart transportation choices. Jeff is a professional engineer and certified planner with 24 years of transportation and land use consulting experience, mostly for public sector clients. He serves as a workshop instructor for the National Complete Streets Coalition and is a past chair of both the Institutes of Transportation Engineers Bicycle and Pedestrian Bicycle Council, they reversed it on me, and the Newark, Delaware Bicycle Committee. Jeff holds a degree from the University of Delaware and the University of California, Berkeley. I've asked Jeff to offer any insights on the practice of a consultant planner in these events. So we all have a copy of the code in front of us. I hope you all do too. There are two primary sections that we're responsible for: the principles to which we aspire, and then the actual our rules of conduct that we're responsible for. So we're going to act on those. My first question is to Dave Edgell and then Anne Marie Townsend. Is the friendship between the state and the city planning directors an inherent conflict of interest?
Okay, thanks, Jim. As you can tell from the skit, we kind of wrote this in a fictional way, but it is fairly close to some things that have occurred in reality. For instance, Anne Marie and I are friends, and we used to work together at the state planning office, and she is the city planning director, and I work for the state. I think when you look at the Code of Ethics, the fact that you might be friends with another planner or another agency is not necessarily an inherent conflict of interest, but there are a number of points in the Code of Conduct that you have to be aware of as you interact with your friends and colleagues. I was just looking at, if we look at Section B, the rules of conduct, if you look at item 6, it says, we shall not perform work on a project for a client or employer if in addition to agreed upon compensation there's a possibility for direct personal or financial gain to us or family members or persons living in the household, unless our client or employer, after full written disclosure, consents in writing to the arrangement. And this skit kind of skirts a little close to that, in that I believe the state planner's son worked for the company in question, Amazugal, and they could have perceived to get some gain if there was an expansion that might have clouded the state planner's perspective in that case. And I believe the city planning director's wife was a construction industry person or executive who might have benefited from the construction directly. And those are things, as you interact, you just must be cognizant of, I think. And just point out one other one. Number 8, we shall not, as public officials or employees, engage in private communications with planning process participants if the discussions relate to a matter over which we have authority to make a binding final determination, such as private communications permitted by law or agency rules, procedures, or custom. And that is again one just to be aware of as you interact on these matters. So I would just finish up this little section by saying it's fine to be friends and colleagues, and Delaware is a small state, and we do all know each other in the planning community, but you really have to put yourself in dealing with
these matters as an AICP planner first, and do everything that you can to adhere to the code. So, Anne Marie, what are your thoughts?
I would just add to that again, like you said, David. In Delaware, in particular, we're a small state, so we all know each other. We're a small profession here, so there are a lot of friendships made over the years. And it really is a matter of making sure that the decisions we make are in the interest of our employers and the constituents that we serve. And I think that the points that you brought out and the rules of conduct are important to just keep in mind.
I'd like to go back to David a second. Does the state, and reiterate what he said about the relationships, does the state planning director's relationship with the CFO create an issue for her?
Well, I kind of think it may, and am I correct to remember the CFO was the son or daughter of the state planning director?
It was a son, yeah.
A son, yeah. So I think there are times when maybe it's important to recuse yourself if you have these very close relationships that are so closely tied to a major project like that. And that might be something that the state planning director in this case might want to think about to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. And if nothing else, in any kind of public disclosure to disclose that relationship to the public when discussing the project is the minimum I would suggest.
Jeff, let's get you involved. What else could they have done to comply with the ethics code and meet the goal of keeping the project on schedule? Is it possible to make this happen?
I think it is, and I'll build on what David said, because this is obviously set up in a way that creates all kinds of interrelated, relationships between the different players. One of the best ways to make that work to the public's advantage is to be very transparent about that and to seek opportunities to collaborate in a very public way to be able to get things to happen. For example, a lot of examples that were given that the city and state planners were looking at the plans and seeing all kinds of issues. Sitting down with the appropriate staff and other stakeholders as needed with the applicant might provide a real opportunity to address some of those issues up front in a setting that is ethically appropriate rather than behind closed doors. I also think there are a lot of opportunities that Amazoogle could have taken, and I haven't worked for private clients for quite some time, but I used to at one point, and there are a lot of opportunities that they could make to compromise in their design. In other words, if they're really close to a threshold for state planning and they're really anxious to get a project moving forward, rather than the somewhat dubious process of getting a waiver, can they make adjustments to their design to fit within the published criteria? So that removes any need for deals, essentially. So I think there's something that the applicant can take on as well to try to make this a really above-board process.
I would just I just want to add, it's funny because as I listen to the skit and have, participated in it, we are frequently as managers of planning departments and planning offices in a position of how do we expedite something that is clearly a community priority, but still make sure that we don't cut corners. And I think it's very important as managers that we are conscious of when we speak to our staff in assigning something. We have in here, don't forget your evaluations tomorrow, and I doubt that most of us would say that, but certainly there are times where we say to our staff, we need to get this done, this is a priority, we need to get on this. And I think it's very important that when we do that, it's very clear that we're saying, we don't want you to cut corners, we're not asking you to violate codes. If you see issues, let me know so I can be out there addressing them. And I think that's, so you show an extreme example here of, you've got a problem, you have an evaluation tomorrow, but the reality is that we frequently as managers may be inadvertently putting our staff in that feeling of that position without realizing it just by the frenzied tone at times.
You all seem to make this sound like it's over the top. I don't understand that. All right, to all of you, it's typically another, as in this case, another community department or even a department division leading the charge for a grant-driven development project. How does a professional planner traverse the politics, small p, of the project? What do they have to do?
One of the things that I try to do is work very closely with our economic development staff. And you know, when our economic development manager came on board, one of the first things I did was educated him about the process and about the code so that he wouldn't be in a position of promising something that we couldn't deliver. So I think a lot of these things can be addressed by communicating with our other agency staff to make sure that they understand that, you know, at the end of the day, it's not to anybody's advantage for us to short-circuit the code, because if we do, aside from violating our own ethics, if something gets challenged in court, it could hold that project up a whole lot more than that month by just following the process.
Okay, I have a question from one of the viewers, and it goes as follows. Is it realistic to expect a company to make, there it is, going backwards. Is it realistic to expect a company to make compromises in their own decision when they have a carrot on a stick that they can wield to get whatever they want?
Any of you?
Well, this is Jeff. Everyone's pointing at me. You can't see it, but I think to some extent it is, because many applicants, once they've made a decision to move forward with the project, have invested at least some time and money. And of course, there's always a discussion in economic development circles. Well, we'll just take our ball and go home, and we'll move to the next city. And that's certainly their prerogative if there's a sense of stonewalling or really unrealistic expectations. But if there's going to be some investment made in the design and planning of a project, certainly I think there's an expectation that they can come to the table with some minor adjustments to a project. You know, very significant things, you know, that's not really a matter of ethics necessarily, it's more a matter of economic feasibility. But I would think to be good neighbors and good participants, and to really facilitate the quick approval of their project, that they would be willing to do that.
Anybody else have anything?
This is David. I would just kind of add that, you know, this example is maybe you know, sort of the square peg in the round hole, coming through with a very tight time frame and in a very difficult and sort of stressful situation for everybody involved. And you know, I think the code really expects that certified planners really focus on the transparency of the process, identifying the issues, in this case historic and environmental. And you know, as Jeff said, you know, if there were changes that could be made on behalf of the applicant, you know, in order to meet their time frame and make this deal work, and for them to get their federal funds, I would think that they would be, you know, inclined to do that rather than try to fight their fight and put their square peg in their round hole. So I do think you know, it's very situational, very dependent upon you know, the circumstances. But you know, again, certified planners are really expected to look at all those things and at least bring them to light and try to work those things out.
So we've kind of done some variations on a form for this as well. We've created a couple of scenarios to the Amazoogle process where they've changed up the circumstances a bit. So let's listen to scenario 1.
The city and state planning directors are chatting on the phone.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Charles. Have you been able to make a determination regarding the waiver request?
Yes, I have reviewed the application and determined I cannot review the application due to my stepson's connection to the project. I'm turning over the project for review to Mary. Please contact her with any questions.
Thanks, Charles. We will continue to move forward with the project. I appreciate your decision and will work with Mary for the remainder of the project.
So our panel discussed this a few minutes ago, and I'd like to offer them the opportunity to add to anything they've said before. Obviously, this is something that they wanted to pay attention to, and it seems to be bigger than it might seem at first blush. Have any other comments?
I mean, I would say I think we're probably, as planners, frequently in this or similar position, whether it's you know, something happening in our neighborhood, making sure that, you know, we draw that distinction that we're not doing this to benefit our neighborhood. It's, you know, that kind of thing. I think it's always best if there is, like David said earlier, the perception that you could have a conflict, to hand it off to the appropriate staff. I mean, I know I will frequently, we had a Board of Adjustment case, for instance, I think last year, where my neighbor, who I've met once or twice but lives on my street, was applying for a variance, and I handed it off to staff and said, if you have any questions, deal with, you know, another member of staff. I wanted to make it very clear that there was nothing, nobody could say that I influenced the decision making in a way that would benefit my property or somebody who I'm perceived to be friends with because we live near each other.
And I think it's especially true in a case here where you have two different agencies working together to confirm this, in my mind, good decision in writing so that everyone understands how the process has worked.
Okay, given that, let Peter, can we go to scenario 2, please?
The city and state planning directors are chatting on the phone.
Tom, I pulled the reviewing agencies to see if they'd be willing to grant the waiver for the project. The Department of Environmental Quality objects due to those stupid striped muskrat, and we cannot grant the waiver.
Thanks, Charles, for looking into the situation. I should have known the Department of Environmental Quality would want to protect those pesky muskrats.
What are you going to do next?
I have to keep the project moving forward. Ron, the mayor, will have me retire sooner if I don't. It will go to the Historic District Commission for their recommendation, and at the Planning Commission meeting, I will inform them that the state's planning review comments will come at a later date. Hopefully, they will recognize the need to postpone the application.
Well, good luck then.
Thanks.
So this is Jim. I'm acting as a moderator here and have my own observations. But I'd like to poll the panel here and see if they have any comments on the dishonest way of handling the Environmental Quality Department's comments.
I guess I would say you've got somebody who's punting, and you know, we as planning offices are the gatekeepers. So once we open the gate and put something in front of our appointed and elected bodies, they stand the chance of making a poor decision if we are not doing our jobs as the gatekeepers. So by saying, yeah, well, I'll just disclose that we haven't met the requirements of the process, you're putting yourself and your employer in a bad spot. So both from the rules of conduct standpoint and the aspirational principles, I think that we have fallen short if we just simply disclose that you haven't followed the process.
Yeah, I've got a couple of observations. First of all, procedure-wise, you know, this is, you know, that they couldn't grant the waiver for an environmental reason. That's probably the right decision professionally. The way it was characterized by the state planning director appears to me to be contrary to item 10, We shall neither deliberately nor with reckless indifference misrepresent the qualifications, views, and findings of other professionals. The environmental department has obviously a professional opinion that the striped muskrat's a very important creature and it's endangered and should be protected. And no matter what the planning director's personal feelings are, I think it's against the code of conduct to kind of downplay or belittle that view. So I think that's a very important point to make. The other observation I would have is that the state planning director and the town planning director really sort of said, hey, what are you going to do? Yeah, good luck to you, as Anne Marie said, sort of punting, where I feel it probably would have been more appropriate to be transparent and talk through how would this process work. Maybe there is a process by which the comments could come in later and the application could have been tabled, and that should have maybe been a game plan that would have kept the integrity of the process. But in this case, it was sort of a handoff and sorry about your luck type of thing. So I think those were a couple things I thought.
I think some other elements are, just despite the state planning director's seeming attitude to the project or to the environmental review, I think there's some questions about whether there's really anything going wrong ethically with the process, because depending on how the state and city MOU works, it may be entirely feasible and ethical for the city to move forward with their review of the project, regardless of the fact that the state review has not yet been completed. So I'm not sure if we really have an answer to that.
So at the end of all this, I want to ask our panel to talk about how this would change if it were a single-person office. So much of Delaware, as it is across the country, are a planning office with a single planner that may not have a state planner to rely on. But let's go on with scenario 3 and see if we can get another little tidbit from that. Peter?
The city and state planning directors are chatting on the phone.
Tom, I've determined to grant the waiver for the project.
Thanks, Charles. That's great news. So no agency had any issues with the project?
The Department of Environmental Quality had an objection regarding those darn muskrats, but that is a small part of the overall importance of the project to the community and for my family. Good luck with the project. See ya.
Oh, the public notice deadline for the newspaper was due today at noon. I missed the deadline. I'm going to have to postpone the meeting for a month.
So in scenario 3, we have a couple of different things we've talked about before a bit. I think they're becoming a little bit more important to the process right now. I'd like to hear the panel's comments on that, if anybody has anything.
Well, I would say definitely at this point the state planning director has made it clear that the interest of his son's employer was being put against over the public interest. I think also as a state agency that is supposed to be representing all of the departments, you may or may not agree with the rules, with the comments, with the regulations, but there is an ethical responsibility to at least resolve them before deciding to dismiss them. And again, it could be totally ethical in the end. You call the department secretary and say, are you sure this is the right comment? Are you sure? There could be more to it that you don't know, but to just decide, you don't care about the endangered species, you care more about your son's employer, you're definitely over the line at that point.
Yeah, I think if we look at our principles, one of the things that we always try to aspire to, and just looking it up here in the code, it's 1H, we shall deal fairly with all participants in the planning process. those of us who are public officials or employees shall also deal even-handedly with all planning process participants. And very clearly, this is displacing a very important participant in the planning process. So I think that's pretty cut and dried. And of course, we've thrown in, because we like to add complexity to these things, the issue of the public notice. And that's fairly cut and dried, that if it is in fact codified, that you can't add something to the agenda after that deadline. But in the spirit of trying to move the project forward, perhaps there is something that's available in the code to allow calling a special meeting with appropriate advance notice. So it wouldn't have to wait an entire month, but of course it needs to be done in accordance with whatever regulations are in place.
And
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, this sort of seems like a case of unintended consequences, in that if they had followed the process and gone ahead with the state review, now that they've got a month delay, perhaps it could have been completed and the process would have had the integrity that we expect that it would have had. So,
Right.
So again, falling back on the principles that we have to adhere to, the state planning director probably should have thought more about the agency's comments rather than his own son's, financial future. So I think that just underscores the importance there.
Jim, we have an observation from someone in the field, and it goes approximately like this. And let's not forget about how the developer, the mayor, and the planner ended up in those great seats at the ball game. It was ethically doomed before it started.
Can I just add something on that? I mean, unfortunately, we can't control what our elected officials do, and so the reality is, well, again, this isn't happening in our town, but you don't. Sometimes those promises are made by people who are not bound by the AICP Code of Ethics, and then we're left to figure out how to keep it all together and keep it all above board, and that is frequently what I find the job of a planner is to do.
So some of this has been scripted and some of this is off the cuff. I got an off the cuff question. So are we as planners, especially the public sector ones here, actually responsible for decisions? Or are we responsible to the process, and it's a board or some other entity that actually makes the decisions, like a planning board or planning commission? David?
I would say vis-a-vis the skit and even real life, sometimes we are responsible for decisions, such as the decision to grant a waiver to a project, and so that is one aspect. But our other responsibility is to provide fair and accurate information to all planning process participants and to the process itself to maintain that integrity and to be transparent. So I think that's that's a special responsibility. But again, there are decisions planners make every day. How to process a project, what process it goes through, how to apply conditions to the project. So we do have boards and commissions that we're responsible to, but we also have decisions that we do make.
And I would say certainly when it isn't our decision, when it's the decision of our councils or our boards or commissions, our commitment needs to be to the process, because we need to make sure that their decision is based on the best available information and the process that is set forth in the code. If we don't abide by the process, regardless of whether they make a great decision or a poor decision, we've lapsed. And what I say frequently, because when you're working with boards and commissions and councils, sometimes they don't make the decision that you want them to make. But as long as you have done what you need to do in terms of the process, I think we have done our jobs as planners. We can't control the outcome all the time, but we can control the process.
Thank you very much. What are we up to? Scenario 4, Peter? Let's go with it. The state planning director walks into Mary's office.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Charles. Have you made a determination regarding the waiver request by the city for the Amazugal project? I saw the objection by the Department of Environmental Quality about those muskrats.
I've determined that a waiver is appropriate and will be granted over the objections from the Department of Environmental Quality. Please put the waiver approval letter together and put it on my desk when you're done.
Seriously? This cannot happen. You're always looking for a good story for the front page. I have a good one for you. The state is granting a waiver for the new Amazugal project in the Ware over the objection from the Department of Environmental Quality.
So we have a couple of conundrums in this scenario, and I'd like to hear what the panel thinks about those. If anybody has any comments.
No, this is perfectly fine. No.
He's the private sector planner.
I'm kidding. Obviously, there are a number of issues, and was looking for one with Anne Marie here, but one that I do see is Section 18. This is in our rules of conduct. We shall not direct or coerce other professionals to make analyses or reach findings not supported by available evidence. So one, presumably AICP certified planner, the state planning director, having one of his staff issue a letter or finding that's in direct contradiction to the opinions of the Department of Environmental Quality certainly seems to violate that section.
And I would add, as it relates to our aspirational principles, that we are, and again, you don't necessarily have to do the dirty work, but we shall accept the decisions of our client or employer. She can remove herself from the situation and not, go to the point of violating the ethics, but it is not for her to call the media, I don't think, and alert them, because again, while the process is important, it doesn't help the process to necessarily, I think internal channels are better within your employer. Go to the human resource office and say, I'm stuck. Any ideas? How can we resolve this? Go through the proper chains of command. But to call the media, I think you're stepping.
As I was listening to this, I was running through our code and trying to find someplace that it said that that communication with the news was actually against our code, and I think it does. In number 9, we should not engage in private discussions with decision makers in the planning process. I'd assume the newspaper would be a decision maker, or influencer at least.
Well, and specifically it says in any manner prohibited by law or agency rules or procedures. So typically in a planning office, communications are probably supposed to go through one person. So you're probably, as a junior staff member, prohibited from calling the press to leak a story.
And it's probably best not to bring outside the conversations that are happening in the office. Okay, let's try scenario number 5, Peter.
The city planning director and Kathy are talking just before the planning commission meeting begins.
Crap, I just realized we missed the public notice requirements by 1 day. I forgot to include the day of the meeting when figuring out the days for the notice.
We will need to pull the item from the agenda.
I can't afford to do that. We're going to go forward with this meeting.
But we need to...
Stop. We need to get in there. Let's go. Good evening, Planning Commission. Tonight on the agenda is the application for addition to the Amazugal site in the downtown. The Historic District Commission reviewed the application, and the state has granted a waiver for the project from their review process. Kathy will now give an overview of the application.
Thank you, Tom. The application tonight is for the review of a 150,000 square foot building addition to the existing Amazugal site in the downtown. The state granted the waiver over the objection from the Department of Environmental Quality regarding the endangered striped muskrats and the fact that public notice was not completed in compliance with the zoning ordinance.
So it seems that our two planners here, the director and the staff planner, have a difference of opinion. And at least, was it Kathy, the staff planner, has done disclosure. You know, I think it's appropriate that we talk about disclosure. It's also appropriate we talk about how things are presented as a staff. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think definitely the city planning director was wrong, and I'm looking at the, I saw it. There was something about, oh, I can't find it now. In the rules of conduct, you know, for the city planning director to instruct her to violate the code is clearly wrong. I don't know that it means that she did the right thing, though. I think that's a real tough call because she was on the spot. It's not like she had time she didn't have time to discuss it with him. They were walking into the meeting, so she's in a position where she either has to follow the script and do something that she believes she knows to be wrong, or to disclose the facts.
Yeah. If you look at the principles to which we aspire under number 2, our responsibility to our clients and employers, A says we shall exercise independent professional judgment on behalf of our clients and employers, and that I believe is what Kathy has done, where she has decided that, you know, the information should be disclosed about the application not meeting the requirements, and also about the objection, which really shouldn't be. It should be a matter of public record, actually, that objection was received by that other office. But then you look at B, we shall accept the decisions of our client or employer concerning the objectives and nature of the professional services we perform, unless the course of action is illegal or plainly inconsistent with our primary obligation to the public interest. So I think that kind of covers her. You know, she saw that those two things were clearly wrong, and, you know, by disclosing it, I think that at least these principles back her up. Now, how she does with her employer the next day in her evaluation, I don't know, but she has followed the code.
I found the rule of conduct I was looking for. It's actually number 2. We shall not accept an assignment from a client or employer when the services to be performed involve conduct we know to be illegal or in violation of these rules. And I think, you know, as an employer, to put an employee in the position that they either have to do this or not listen to you, we've stepped over the line. But I think in that case, you know, again, she didn't have many choices. It was game time. She had to get out there. She had to give a report, and I think it was important that she put it on the record.
But we don't know about the organization's customs, though, which is also mentioned in the Code of Ethics, and whether her response clearly, based on what we've discussed in the Code of Ethics, should have been not to allow it to move forward on the agenda. But perhaps she had a different opportunity for a response in either taking it up the chain of command within the city and talking to other folks to see if there's another means to do that rather than choosing a public forum.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Peter's ready to go with our next skit. So hang on for the marsh rats.
It's been 1 year since Amazoogle opened their new distribution center in Springfield City. The area baseball team, the Marsh Rats, are looking to build their new stadium in Springfield City and have contacted Ron, the enthusiastic city development director. He has promised to grease the skids so that the project can inject a much-needed boost into the city's ailing economy. Now, all he has to do is make good on his promises, because the Marsh Rats are coming.
Take me out to the ball game, take me out with the crowd by me side. Peanuts and Cracker Jacks, I don't care if I ever forget that for its root for the home team. They know when it's streaming. It's 1, 2, 3, strikes you're out at the old ball game.
Springfield City, Delaware is still struggling with a loss of businesses and an outsourcing of jobs. While Amazoogle did build a large addition to their site last year, things are still tough for the residents. The mayor and economic development director are meeting to discuss the potential of bringing the local baseball team into the city's downtown. Let's listen in.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, Ron. It's nice to see you. What do you have for me today?
Well, it's been a pretty good year. Amazoogle is about to open up their distribution center, and I found out that the Marsh Rats baseball team is looking for a new location. It would be a real coup to put them in downtown away from the county.
It has been a good year. The Amazoogle deal worked out pretty well. Not as many jobs as you promised, but still new jobs. I thought the county had a deal in place to keep the Marsh Rats at their current stadium.
They sort of have a deal. You know how these things go. Anyway, I think we have a great location for them in downtown near the old-time neighborhood.
That would be a great location. Think of all the small retail shops and bars and restaurants that would bring to downtown. Go talk to the Marsh Rats. I do love that muskrat mascot.
I love that mascot too. I don't know why they roll them out in a giant frying pan though. I'll talk to them and help them through the process.
You'll need to talk to Kathy about the process and let her know I want this done. She's still the interim director, so she'll understand what needs to happen. And you know my saying, all economic development is good economic development. Make it work.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I will make it work.
Kathy is the interim director after the last director retired. She is hopeful that she will be made director within the next month. Finally, Ron, everyone's favorite economic development director, is still from the big city and still used to getting things done and done his way. Kathy sees Ron walking toward her office just as her day is beginning. Great. Let's take a look as Ron meets with her.
Kathy, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. How are you, Ron?
I'm great.
What project do you have today?
I told the mayor that there was a great opportunity to have the Marsh Rats build a new stadium in downtown near the Amazoogle site.
Near the old-time neighborhood?
Yes, it would turn that neighborhood around, allow for new housing to be built in its place, upscale housing rather than that working-class crap. I already have some developers in mind to talk about new luxury condos.
At least this project doesn't need to go through the state review process, I think. That got complicated with Amazoogle. But remember, we have our own process we need to follow. Please don't.
Look, I don't care anything about the process. This project needs to move quickly so the county doesn't figure out that we stole their beloved mascot, the muskrat. And why do the planners insist on slowing everything down?
I know jobs are important. However, we have a process that exists to protect the public interest. And there are still the endangered striped muskrats in the area. Please have the project engineer meet with me, AICP, to discuss the application process.
Look, we don't have time for all of that. I will have them send you a copy of the plan to get it moving. We need to get this moving, and you're still only an interim director.
Thanks, Ron, for reminding me about my interim status. However, I still need to meet with the engineer to discuss the project.
Fine, I will tell them, but the mayor wants to get this done, and it's budget time, and there seems to be excess in the planning budget. Who really needs a copier that's Staples, or just another planner to slow down the process? You have a good day.
Bye. Why is it always evaluation or budget time? He needs to get creative.
Kathy is still thinking about her conversation with Ron and what impact this project could have on the city, especially the environment and the old-time neighborhood.
Why is everyone in such a rush to get the project through? Okay, let's start looking at the plan. The zoning is good. The commercial zone allows for the stadium as a conditional use. There are wetlands on the site, and the stadium is proposed to be located within 30 feet of the edge of the wetlands, but the code does require 50 feet. But They can ask for a waiver from the Planning Commission. The striped muskrat live there. Funny, the marsh rats want to encroach onto the muskrats, their mascot's natural habitat. It is also not providing the required number of parking spaces. The stadium height is too tall, so they will need a variance from the Board of Adjustment. The plan does meet the tree planting requirement, also good. What? No sidewalks on the north side? Why? How do they expect people to get from the stadium from the north? Only an engineer would think that is a good idea. Another waiver from the Planning Commission, but I can't support that one. Parking is 30% short. They claim they are going to share parking with the Amazugal site 2 blocks away. Planning Commission will have to approve that as well. Only 3 waivers and 1 variance. I've seen worse applications. Not only is it on the water and there are striped muskrats in the area, but the stadium will abut an old-time neighborhood. This is a fragile neighborhood that has been hanging on. The neighborhood was mostly homeowners until hit by the recession, but the past 5 years it has transitioned into just over half rentals. The comp plan calls for this area to be a transition area to ease commercial uses to the neighborhood. While the stadium is a conditional use, is it the best use next to the neighborhood? They will need to go to the Board of Adjustment to ask for a height variance, but the board doesn't meet for another 3 weeks, but the Planning Commission meets in 2. It really should go to the board first, but this way I can keep it moving. That should keep the mayor and Ron happy for now. What am I supposed to do with this 800-page environmental report? I'm not an environmental planner, and I don't have the money to hire anyone who can interpret it. Okay, let's finish reviewing the process. Let's hope they don't bring Muskie the muskrat to the meeting. It seems to scare little children, or is it just me? Hello?
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Charles. What can I do for the state?
I heard you may be working on the new Marsh Rat Stadium project.
Wow, news really travels fast, especially in a small state. I only got the plan this morning.
Well, to be honest, Ron talked to the state's Economic Development Office, and they called me. They wanted to see if I could push it forward, and I was wondering if I could help out in any way with the project.
I'm not really sure. I just started looking over the project.
Well, let me know. I'd be happy to help. It seems questionable with regards to the city's land use plan per the comp plan. I also double-checked, and it doesn't have to go through the state's review process, but you may want to bring it through just to be safe.
I don't have time to bring it through. As always, it needs to be rushed through the process or else. Thanks, though. I did email a copy of the plan to a few other agencies, just in case.
You may want to think about talking to Tom. He knows that area really, really well. He also grew up there.
We really shouldn't talk to Tom. He's now chair of the Planning Commission, and the plan needs to be reviewed by them. I will think about it, though. Thanks.
Well, good luck. I will go talk to my realtor, as there may be some cheap land that I can purchase and flip. Go Marsh Rats.
Bye.
Tom, the former city planning director, now retired, is now the chair of the Planning Commission. He stops by the planning office to say hi right before the meeting, along with a few other people, including the local environmentalist, Star Sign Journey, who also lives in the old-time neighborhood.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Ms. Journey. The Planning Commission starts in 35 minutes. Anything you have to say should be stated at the public hearing.
Pish posh. I wanted to let you know how disappointed I am in your office for allowing the stadium to be built so close to the wetlands where the striped muskrats live, and so close to my neighborhood. How could you let this happen?
Ms. Journey, the stadium project still has to go through several public review processes and public hearings before a decision will be made.
Hogwash. You know if the mayor wants something, it happens, and the neighborhood will be destroyed, and it just barely made it through the recession. Now there are more renters than homeowners in the neighborhood. How dare you let this happen? How dare you?
This day just keeps getting better and better. What else could happen?
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
Great. 11 months into retirement, but who's counting?
Ready for tonight's meeting?
I am. What's going on with the stadium application on the agenda, and what was she doing here? She causes trouble everywhere she goes.
Ms. Journey was in to explain her concerns with the application tonight. It seems okay with zoning and land use, and they are asking for 3 waivers. It was in your packet.
You know I'm too busy to read it. Give me the short version.
Tom, it's for the new Marsh Rat Stadium. They need a waiver for the reduction of the overall number of parking spaces, 30%, a reduction in the wetlands setback from 50 to 30 feet, and to eliminate the sidewalks on the north side of the stadium.
That's fine, Kathy. What do I need to know?
It's near the old-time neighborhood, but you know you have time to read the report before the meeting. I need to get ready. I will see you in 30 minutes.
Fine. See you in 30 minutes.
See ya.
join the crowd as the Planning Commission meeting gets underway.
Good evening. Welcome to the Springfield Planning Commission meeting of August 28th. Tonight's agenda is the Marsh Rats Baseball Stadium. Would the planner please give us her report?
Thank you. The property is zoned commercial, and the use as a stadium is a conditional use within the zoning district. The Marsh Rat application requests 3 waivers. The first is for the reduction of required off-street parking spaces by 30%, a reduction in the setback from the wetlands, and for the elimination of sidewalk along a portion of the stadium. The height of the stadium exceeds the maximum height allowed.
That's fine, Kathy. I now open the public hearing for this application.
Hello, I'm Jane Martinez, and I live in the Old Time neighborhood, and I am opposed to this project. I have many, many concerns, which I'll list out here. I have concern with the reduction of the parking spaces by 30%. I live 2 blocks away, and I already have issues with people parking in front of my house and blocking my driveway. With the new stadium, it will get worse. Why can't they rebuild where they're currently located or on the other side of that horrible Amzoogle site? The city keeps encroaching into our nice neighborhood, and it's making it harder and harder for us to keep our homes. Sorry, excuse me. And what about those striped muskrats? They are endangered, and the new stadium will push them out of the natural habitat into my backyard. I don't like this at all.
Next person may come forward to speak. Keep in mind that we are discussing the application before us and not anything that has happened in the past.
Well, hello, I'm John Smith, and I also live in the Old Time neighborhood. And I don't like the fact that there will be no sidewalks that connect the stadium to our development. Why don't they have to? Everywhere else does. How am I going to get to the stadium 2 blocks away? Drive my car? They aren't even going to have enough parking. That seems almost as crazy as a mascot.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I am Bob Jones. I'm a tax-paying resident of this city. This is a bad location for the stadium. Why here, not on the other side of the river, or next to this current stadium? Not here. It will bring down the value of my house. I've lived in the Old Time neighborhood for over 50 years, and I'm living on Social Security. I can't afford to move, nor do I want to. I raised my 2 kids with my late wife in that house. Why should I give up my land or allow this to be built so close to my house?
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak besides Miss Journey? Anyone?
Well, you know who I am. I'm Starshine Journey. I can't believe that you are even considering this application. You, Mr. Chairman, grew up in the Old Time neighborhood and still own the house you grew up in, as did another commission member. That horrible pink and blue house that looks like someone threw up on it. You're going to make a killing by selling your house to the developers. And without sidewalks, how will the muskrats cross the road to the pond?
Can you please refrain from personal attacks of the commissioners or its members, or I will have to ask you to stop talking.
Ha! Stop me from talking? How dare you? My only concern is for this neighborhood and the muskrat, and you dare tell me to stop talking. Fine. I will leave for now, but you will hear from me again.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and turn it over to the commission members for questions and a recommendation to City Council. Commission members, do we have a recommendation?
Just like to mention the Star Sign Journey is our noble president of the chapter, but she doesn't want me to say that. So this is we're doing kind of variations on a theme here. This presents a new set of conundrums for the town to deal with. I will say that our code is, it's fairly explicit. We don't have a lot of things to work with here, guys. So we do tend to overlap a bit. But let's open it up to the panel and see if they have any comments on what we just heard. They're all looking at each other.
Not quite sure where to start, but I think one of the, I'll just pick one to start, and that's that staff did not at least publicly have the opportunity to present their recommendations and the consideration of the waivers and the variants, which of course, Tom should have allowed to occur as part of the meeting. And we don't know, having not heard it, whether there is a recommendation that the council or the commissioners have in front of them, whether to accept or grant that. So without that, it's a little hard to say whether the city planners or the interim planning directors' actions were unethical.
One of the things that she had to do to be creative and keep it moving was, even though the preference would be that the Board of Adjustment would review it before the Planning Commission would, she reversed that order. I don't think that there's anything necessarily unethical in that. I think, frequently we're put in positions where we need to figure out how do we meet the requirements of the code, how do we make sure that everything is done appropriately and still keep it on track. So, I think it's interesting because frequently we have to think outside of the box, and I'm not sure that I personally think that she was trying to make sure that no corners got cut while she still, maintained the speed in the process. So unless there was something in code or in written policy that would have precluded her from doing that, I think that was actually a good way to make sure that we didn't skip something and inadvertently, violate the Code of Ethics in doing that.
I'm interested about the relationship between the Planning Commission Chairman, who Tom, the previous planning director, recently retired, presumably an AICP planner still, and the new interim planning director, and the way that he treated her, I think, was not quite in keeping with the professional standards that the code expects. He really belittled and sort of pushed aside her staff report, allowed the project to be heard without the benefit of a staff recommendation. And I don't think just because you've retired that you forget that you're an AICP. And again, we don't know if he turned in his AICP credentials or if he's on a retired membership through APA and AICP. We just don't know those facts. But I do think as a professional planner, in his new role as a private citizen on the Planning Commission, I kind of feel that those principles still do apply. And I'd like to hear from the other panelists whether they feel as well. So as well.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean the code says we shall describe and comment on the work and views of other professionals in a fair and professional manner, and clearly that was she was not accorded that behavior by the chairman.
And is it I'm also curious about whether either you think it's the right thing to appoint the previous planning director as the Planning Commission chair. And I will say that I do know retired planners who do sit on planning commissions and have other roles in local government appointments, and even current planners do that sometimes in their communities. So I wonder what your thoughts are on the balance between your professional obligations as an AICP planner versus your community role.
There is that in the rules of conduct, the time that you're after leaving, hold on, where is it, where you are not supposed to be working. Okay, we shall not as salaried employees undertake other employment in planning or related profession, whether or not for pay, without having made full disclosure to the employer who furnishes salary, blah, blah, blah. Hold on, that's not even the one I'm looking for. Sorry.
Look at maybe 3.
Is it 3?
Yeah.
I know it was a long one. Okay, we shall not accept an assignment from a client or employer to publicly advocate a position on a planning issue that is indistinguishably adverse to a position we publicly advocated for our previous client or employer. I would say, while it's not clear, it doesn't say you can't serve on a planning commission, I would say to avoid falling into that, you should wait a couple of years before you would serve in that capacity, because again, you're now in a decision-making role on things where you've influenced.
Especially if you were previously the planning director of
Right.
that city, then then become the planning commission chair. That's a little close to call.
It's interesting. The one thing we didn't talk about in this or the other skit is a lot of times economic development staff are also planners, and the skits were silent on that. But I would say definitely if our economic development director was a certified planner, that guy might need to be looked at by the ethics officer.
I think the impression was clearly he was not, or
Right.
he wouldn't have been behaving the way he was.
Jeff, anything?
Just one small thing, and that's the chair not disclosing his property interests that are near the stadium, and that's very difficult sometimes, especially in a small town where everyone lives relatively close to each other. But I think at least stating publicly that he lived in the neighborhood and so had certain opinions would have been the appropriate ethical thing to do.
You know, Peter mentioned the same thing, the private gains that could potentially come off this project. You know, for our sake, as professional planners, we may not have the responsibility for advocating or countering those attempts to of somebody gain from a project. Certainly, it's not a place for us to advocate based on that, though.
I mean, I think if the former director is still an AICP planner, you know, I think we have number 5 in the rules of conduct to worry about, that we shall not, as public officials or employees, accept from anyone other than public employer compensation, you know, advantage that may be perceived as compensation related to our public employment or office. You know, if he owns property and he stands to gain, again, a lot of times it's not whether that's your intent, but it's the issue of perception. So if he's trying to push this through, especially after cutting off the interim planning director, you know, it certainly is creating the perception that he has something to gain and he wants this to go through. So again, if he's still a member of AICP, I think he needs to be a little more careful of how he's behaving.
I'm curious about how you both feel about there's a little piece in there about the state planning director kind of making a comment that he was going to buy some cheap land to flip near the stadium, and you know, whether that was an offhand comment or whether he was a real estate speculator. You know, I personally think that whether or not we can tie it to one of these things in the code, that's a pretty risky combination of being a planner and also a real estate speculator. But yeah, I'm interested in what you guys think.
Certainly questionable, but there was also some question in the skit as to whether he had any authority or influence over the review of the project. It sounded as though it wasn't going through the state process.
Right.
And you know, we don't have necessarily any indication that he was trying to unduly influence the process. So some questionable appearance, but I don't know if I saw any specific breaches of the code.
But I would say definitely if you're a planner at a municipal level, and you know that if you do have real estate interests, other than obviously everybody needs to live somewhere, that you really should keep those interests outside of your jurisdiction, because you know, we are bringing forth ordinances, we're reviewing plans, all of those things can directly or indirectly benefit any property in the city. So to be transparent and to make sure that there's not any concern that, you know, boy, we have a great program, oh, I'm making this change to the code, now I'm going to buy up all this land. You know, it again, you don't want it, if it's not going to read well on the front page of the paper, maybe you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. So the state planner being at arm's length, maybe not even living in the community, you know, maybe there's not that direct, you know, influence and connection, but it still doesn't look particularly good, and you certainly wouldn't want that on the front page of the paper.
Right.
So Peter, we have a few minutes left. Is there anything else in the chat pod that we should be paying attention to? Looks like not. So yeah, we do have a group of people sitting in the peanut gallery here. Offer an opportunity for anybody to come up and make a comment or ask a question. an inspired group. I've got one final question. Kathy seems like she's the single person in office right now. What if she actually had a novice planner on staff that she was able to hand this project review off to? I'm assuming that novice planner isn't covered by the AICP. What implications are there?
First of all, I'm not sure why she would want or need to hand the project off to another planner. I don't think I remember seeing any real direct conflict of interest that she had with this process. And you know, in that instance, I don't think it would probably be the right decision to charge a subordinate or a younger planner without the experience on dealing with such a large project. And there is some aspirational principles about being an advocate for and training and developing professionally younger planners. So throwing them into that situation may not be quite appropriate. She as a director is going to have to take this one and follow it through, I think.
So we're down to a few minutes. I want to thank everybody, all the panel, for providing their insights this afternoon. We've gathered them together to answer any questions for you all, our listeners. We also have a small peanut gallery of members joining us, as I said. I want to thank them for helping us today, but especially Pete Von Glahn, our engineer and narrator and chief bottle washer. Today running the microphones and the pre-recorded material. His help allows us to do much of what the chapter does. Thanks for listening to the episode of Cooperative Certification Maintenance, brought to you by the Consortium of Chapters and Divisions. You can see the current listing of all webcasts on the new web location at www.ohioplanning.org/planningwebcasts. That's us for us from Dover, Delaware. Have a good afternoon.
This concludes the webcast. I want to thank the members of the Delaware Chapter who have performed in the skits: Bill Brokenbraw, Janelle Cornwell, Tony DePrima, Mike Fortner, James Galvin, Mary Ellen Gray, Mike Hahn, Herb Inden, Anne Marie Townsend, and our narrator, Peter Von Glahn. This session has been approved for 1 1/2 ethics CM credits. Please check ohioplanning.org for future presentations from our co-sponsors. Thanks for joining us.